Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with this it's really over $1,500 phone, it is, in my opinion, the most practical and competent folding phone on the market. I say that because between its pricing and overall performance, it's the only folding phone that I would actually own. And I did decide to keep the Z Flip because I do feel that it is innovative and functional, something that I cannot say about its competition. So this isn't a knock at the original Galaxy Fold. I felt that that was really more of a proof of concept, and the fact that, Samsung could show us that they could make a folding phone that could also be a tablet. And trust me, I wanted that phone, but its production delays, the defective parts in terms of the display, that whole debacle, that prevented me from entertaining it as an option. Also, availability. I really couldn't even get my hands on an unlocked version of that. I had to pick up an AT&T version. Here, Samsung was capable when it came to getting these out there and available. Even when they were out of stock, they never really trailed by more than a week. So it showed that they were ready to go with this. And yes, it didn't go through the scrutiny that the original Fold did, and that made a big difference, trust me. Now, you may have noticed I have the Samsung official leather case on it. I like the leather case a lot. It gives it a premium feel. I don't think it's going to protect it from a fall, but I'm not going to be dropping this, and I hope I don't drop it now after I've said that. Not that I'm superstitious, but I'm just saying I don't need to make any prophecies come true here. The overall build quality of this phone is very good. At the same time, the screen is still incredibly fragile, and even though Samsung has claimed that they've used a ultra-thin piece of glass, I will reiterate, be careful with this because, well, you don't want to scratch your brand new $1,500 phone. 256 gigs of internal storage, Snapdragon 855 Plus, which is still a competent and flagship-esque processor. 8 gigs of RAM. I would have liked to have seen more, but, they've decided clearly they wanted to make an affordable, practical offering with a folding display. And that's exactly what the Z Flip is. It just feels like a far more polished and finished product than the Fold. And forget about the Motorola Razr. You've already probably seen my comparison of this phone to the Razr. There is no comparison. I mean, this is superior in every single way. Now, I do wish that the storage was expandable. I do wish that we had slightly better cameras. But those are the corners Samsung cut in order to give us, a folding 6.7-inch AMOLED display that could fit in the palm of your hand. And that's really the allure, that's the beauty of this phone and what Samsung has delivered to market. They do seem to be pretty much marketing this to women, and I understand why. It's really more of, I think, a fashion statement for a lot of people, but for me, absolutely not. I've been waiting for a folding phone that would be worth my money, and pretty much at this point, that's what we're looking at. I mean, that's why I kept it, besides the fact that we are going through a pandemic. Another video, another time. Overall, my biggest critique of this is the front display. I mean, this is really inexcusable on Samsung's behalf. It's better than nothing, but considering the Razr has a 2.7-inch display on the exterior, this phone could have had one as well. I really don't know why we don't have a larger display on the front, and especially considering that the majority of the criticism that the Galaxy Fold received was that its 4.7-inch external display was too small. I don't know how on earth Samsung could have ever thought that this 1.1-inch display would be big enough. Now, it does let you check out your notifications, but in a very limited sense. If you get a text, you'll get a single line readout with that information. But for example, when you just saw my Nest notification, it's saying person, front door, and they're giving me the spotted, but in order to actually see anything, again, because it's a 1.1-inch display, we would have to open the phone up, and it will tell you that. Another issue is with the Google Assistant. If I try to trigger that right now, it will not work with the phone closed. That is something that I know they can address in software, and they better address in software, because that is something that the Razr could do, and I'm scratching my head as to why the more competent and capable Z Flip cannot. But that's really where my critique at this point ends. I I know I'm not going to put a fingernail to this screen. I know I'm not going to get it wet because it does not have an IP68 rating. You cannot get this wet, and dust will affect it. So you do still have to treat this as your little, baby. And I don't see that as being the problem. With the Fold, it was more of an issue because the Fold was much larger, a little bit more unruly, and also the hinge design. I mean, clearly this is a second gen device because we now have a hinge that is positional, and that's the whole point of flex mode. When you use the phone in this position, content up here, other content down here, and they work in tandem, specifically the camera, being one of the more compelling ways. I mean, because regular split screen you could do with any device, and this isn't a split screen, it's a folding screen, right? But, I do love that I can sit at my desk or put this down somewhere, have it open, and it's functional. I mean, that is one of the best parts of this new hinge system. So I expect to see this in the second gen Fold, and if they include an S Pen, well, then my fiance will be getting this. In all likelihood, if she's willing to give up a note. Now, that's another thing I wanted to talk about. For me to leave the note, it took something very special, and that is what this phone delivers, an experience that is very unique. And I'm not saying that because I get satisfaction out of hanging up on people by closing my phone like it's 2002. No, that's not what this is about. I mean, it is nice that when you close it, you can hang up a call. And by the way, you have to change that in the phone settings. It will not do that automatically. Because after all, they know most people picking this up. I mean, many of you weren't born long enough ago in order to even possibly contemplate any concept of nostalgia with a flip phone. And I totally get that. And, people who say that it's nostalgia for them, I understand where you're coming from because I'm old enough for it to be nostalgic, but I also don't miss that. To me, the only reason that it's worth contemplating a flip phone like this is because of what this precisely accomplishes, which is a form factor that I could have only dreamt about without sacrificing a large format display. And that is the beauty of this device. And I don't think that, lives only in one sex, even though Samsung, again, is marketing this primarily to women. I understand why. It's a beautiful phone that gives you a large screen in a small form factor when it's closed. Also, another nice thing is that much like the Galaxy Fold and the Razr, even though the Razr is hot, steamy shit, when it's closed, you don't have to worry about anything damaging the display. Now, there is still a gap, so that is still something you have to be aware of. As good a job as Samsung and other manufacturers are doing in making folding devices, they still can't get them to be completely flush, and you've got to remember that. Also, no way to protect this. I mean, there are other cases on the market, but because it does slide inside of the screen when open, that's just another way for dust to get introduced. I think there's one case on the market, which I reached out to the manufacturer. If they want to send it to me for review, fine. I'm not going to buy it for that purpose, though, because I think I'm sticking with the Samsung, which, by the way, I mentioned it's got a premium look and feel. The problem is it's got the Samsung adhesive disease. So you can see right there, this is coming off slightly. I followed all instructions before any idiots start commenting and saying, did you follow instructions? Like with the Tab S6 keyboard cover, which, wow, so many trolls out there want to defend a product that was made like shit. I call it like it is. This is almost there. And I say that because it stays on for the most part, but I have had a couple of incidents where I'm holding it and, I forget that it's loose and not reliable, and I put a little pressure on, let's say, this part, and it just comes off. And if that means you drop your phone and break your phone, Samsung, you got to check yourself on this one because that's not acceptable. So I've seen reviews of the Spigen case for this phone stating that the adhesive is stronger, and that could be a reason to consider it over this. Any case that puts a divider in between the front cameras and the screen, don't even think about. There's a reason Samsung left this cutout completely open, and that's because there's more hardware here. And you block it, it's just not smart. Take a cue from the company that built the phone itself. But in terms of overall performance, I mentioned earlier that a big problem for me was, could I go from the Note 10 Plus to this? Well, smaller display obviously was already something to get accustomed to. And part of what I loved about the Note 10 Plus was that it's all screen. There is literally no bezel on that phone. It's just a beautiful modern piece of hardware. It's durable. It's a brick house. This is kind of the opposite. We have a frame running around, so we're back in bezel town. It is not as durable, obviously, with no IP68 rating. This is not something going to the beach with me. This is not something I'm going to take into the pool. This is not something that if I'm in the shower or the bath, not that I do that with frequency, that I would bring the phone with me. But if I wanted to, I could with the Note 10 Plus. You cannot do that with this, but that's not enough for me to look away from innovation of this magnitude. And this isn't unruly. It's not cumbersome. And again, the biggest thing is that hinge. The fact that it's positional is such a win for folding displays. And you may think that I sound a little crazy with this, but it is a very big difference. And if the Galaxy Fold could do this, that may have been my daily driver, but it can't, and so it isn't. Also, the timing with the Fold was bad. No delays on this being dropped. Yes, it doesn't have the best, the flagship CPU that we're going to see in the Fold 2, or that we'll see in the new Note, or that's in the S20 Ultra, or the S20 lineup in general. This isn't the Snapdragon 865. Do I think they should have put the 865 in here? Yes. Were they trying to have better margins on this, considering the cost of the folding display? Of course. And that's why we only got 8 gigs of RAM. And this all comes full circle back to my experience with the Note 10 Plus. Even though this has less RAM than the Note 10 Plus, 8 versus 12, and I'm not doing a comparison today, but I likely will in the future, and even though its processor is, only slightly superior to the 855 that's in the Note 10 Plus, the point is that this does edge it out. And it does also outperform the original Galaxy Fold, even though it has more RAM and also has a very similar processor. So the fact that the overall experience that this is able to deliver is virtually the same, if not slightly better than what I had with my Note, that already is a reason that I could justify keeping this phone. Now, if it actually underperformed my Note 10 Plus, like it does in its water and dust resiliency or resistance, I could not consider it at all. I miss the S Pen, no question about it, but the fact that, again, it's competent enough to outperform the Galaxy Fold and the Note 10 Plus, it means that I can live with it and not feel like I got a cut-rate phone. Now, I do miss the additional camera. There's only one more additional on the Note 10 Plus. I have no optical zoom with this. You've got a 10 megapixel here, and then you've got two 12 megapixel cameras right here. They're all good, but they are not as good as what I had on my Note 10 Plus. So that really is the one area that leaves me wishing they hadn't cut corners. And I feel like had they made this a little bit more expensive, like come in at 15 retail or 16 retail, I would have been fine with paying that if there wasn't a compromise on the cameras, the RAM, and the CPU. The no expandable storage, I wish this was a 0.5 terabyte, but again, Samsung took specific precautions or made specific moves in order to make this phone more affordable, since that was one of the biggest, negative pieces of feedback they could have gotten about the Fold being too expensive at $2,000. And then also in the areas where they thought they could get away with it, to lower the price. There's no 5G. There is no 5G version of this. We don't even have a Wi-Fi 6 chipset on this, which I do have on my Note 10 Plus. That's another thing that, if it was more meaningful right now, if I was utilizing Wi-Fi 6 speeds, then I wouldn't even consider this. But because I'm not, and because there's no 5G in my market where I live, it really means that this does check enough boxes for me to give up my Note 10 Plus, and I have done exactly that. And I do miss it. Fingerprint scanner on the side is fine to me. I don't see any issue with that. Overall build quality and battery life, they work. And by the way, the battery life on this, I was a little worried with the 3,300 milliamp hour battery. I mean, with my Note 10 Plus, I have 1,000 more milliamp hours, but battery life is good enough. Okay. It also cannot take on a 45 watt charger for faster charging like the Note 10 Plus. But guess what? Charging is still fast enough with the traditional 15 watt fast charger that is included. The wireless charging that's here, that's another reason I couldn't consider the Razr. No wireless charging, sorry, I'm not going to jump into a time machine and go back to Shitsville. So the power share on here is good, obviously to have, rather have it than not. And just overall performance is what it should be. I think the only thing where I'm really lacking on this, which wasn't a reason to not keep it, was, again, the lack of IP68 coverage for dust and water, and of course, the cameras. I'm not even going to count the processor that should have been the 865 rather than the 855 plus, or the RAM that was 8 and should have been 12. If that was the difference for Samsung to get this down to the price, I understand. And the fact that these have been selling like hotcakes tells me that the future of folding phones is in very good shape. For those of you that think the Fold is a gimmick, it is not a gimmick. A gimmick doesn't make a device half the size. I don't care about the thickness. I had one person say to me, well, it's pretty thick. Hello, thickness is not the problem with large candy bar style phones. It's their physical, actual footprint. And no matter what phone I've had for the last, 7 years, that phone has owned the pocket it's in. This is no different. The difference, though, is that I don't feel like I've got a flak jacket attached to my left or right leg, depending. I usually put it in my left pocket. Now the thieves know where to go. You're not getting it, don't worry. But the whole point is the same, which is that this going into a pocket doesn't feel like I'm carrying around a brick. But my Note 10 Plus, it's a brick. And so when people say this is great for women because it'll go in their purse, I'm like, what planet are you living on? If a woman has a purse, which the majority do, they can have any sized phone they want. They can have, if the Fold was made and it didn't fold, just a 7.3-inch giant thing, they could stick that in a purse unless they're rocking, some tiny clutch. This, in my opinion, is more valuable to men. Not to make it about sex, but so many people have said to me, oh, it's great for women. They can put it in their purse. Yeah, but they can put any phone in their purse. And if they're worried about scratching the display, they put a screen protector on, right? Here, for men or a guy like myself, I think this is fantastic because, as I've been saying, my phone always occupies, one pocket all to itself. But the difference is, do I want it to feel like, I'm a cyborg with some sort of metallic, LTE-driven radio device that is not only taking up the whole pocket, but also is going to be prone to falling out, which is a big problem I have with my Note 10 Plus. If I'm not wearing if I'm wearing any kind of pants that don't have gigantic pockets, just average normal pockets, getting in and out of my car, it will fall out of those pockets. It will just slide out. And I don't carry around an OtterBox case. I'm not one of those people. The only way my phone gets damaged is if some other jerk damages it. And I've had that happen. That's why I'm calling them jerks. Take a piece of advice. Don't let other people touch your phones. I don't care how they look at you, if they think you're nuts. Hit the road, Jack. You ain't screwing up my phone. Because I know how careless and reckless people can be. And by the way, that's your right, but not with my phone. Recently had someone try to touch this when looking at a price match at Staples. And I was just like, what are you doing? Why are you going to touch the phone? And by the way, that wasn't because I didn't want them to touch my phone. It's because we have a pandemic. I frankly shouldn't have even been out at Staples. But it was a run I had to make that was not an option, unfortunately. Otherwise, haven't left my house now in weeks because I've been sick, was in the ER. Anyway, not getting into it. And they did initially put me in the COVID wing. So, final thoughts here on the update is that if you're thinking about this, you don't really need to think about it. It is worth the money. It is worth the price of entry. It is a fantastic flagship folding phone. Do I wish they had done a little bit more? Yeah, sure. But Samsung wants to make the concept a reality. And by that, I don't just mean that it'll be in your hand, but that it's going to sell well. And I know the Fold did not do well. Now it's finally in stock because of the pandemic. It had been just about permanently sold out before then. And I think that's because everybody needs to tighten up now. The economy is in the shitter, and it should be. This pandemic should not have become a pandemic. It did. Our government has done basically nothing. And, well, this is what happens when you allow something to happen that has never occurred before. But I don't want to get too much into that. Again, it's an update about the phone. I think it's worth the money. The only thing that will probably get me to put it down will be the new Fold, if the new Fold checks the boxes I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be waterproof or dust resistant. I don't need the IP68 rating, but give me an S Pen, give me the new hinge, and give me the new goodies. Give me the camera from the S20 Ultra. I don't care if it's got 5G, but if they give me the cameras, the RAM, the storage, higher resolution display, because that's another thing, by the way, I didn't mention. The res on here is actually, it's higher than the resolution on the Galaxy Fold. And from what I can see, at least with my eyes, this looks to be a better OLED than the one found on the Note 10 Plus. So even though that's higher resolution, it says a lot when you can get a folding display and improve the quality that much. So I actually like that we have a bezel here. I don't have any accidental touches anymore. This phone's got a lot going for it, not just a gimmick. So I know I didn't give you a walkthrough on the software because that's not where things really are different. I mean, the One UI, which this does run the latest version, 2.1, it's good. It's been good for a while, folks. People who are still like Samsung's overlay is crap, you haven't used a Samsung phone in probably 3 years, minimum. Pick one up, try it, then get back to me. I mean, I know it was bloatware once upon a time. That's just not the case anymore. This is a fully matured overlay that, for all intents and purposes, feels like an operating system for a reason. Samsung has put a lot of thought into developing this, and it's had many years of maturation. So again, this is currently my favorite phone. Probably only could be ousted by the new Note or the new Fold. And it probably will be the new Fold. And that rounds things out. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.